Welcome back to Tea, Books, and Rainy Days Book Talk podcast. I'm your host, Tiana Howard, and unfortunately, I do not have a special guest today. This is a solo episode, and solo is sometimes okay. Right now, we are in self-isolation, self-quarantine, but really, it's more of a mandated quarantine, and although it is not mandatory for many people, it is something that at this time we're having to deal with. It's scary, and I feel like we're literally in a dystopian novel right now. Um, but yeah, let's talk about it. It's the end of the world. No, not really. But it's the end of a lot of things for a lot of people, unfortunately. This is a crazy time. Um, and this is a book talk podcast, but I think it's really important that we focus on what's going on right now. Um, we are in a pandemic, something we haven't been in for a little while. It's something, not as serious or not as controllable or known about. To break it down quite simply, coronavirus has always been around. This strain, however, COVID-19, is just very, very different and very, very resistant. And no one is immune. No one has superhuman strength like in the books and in the movies. No one is above this. Unfortunately, it sounds bad to say that this is the humbling moment that the human race needs, but it kinda is. I keep replaying in my mind all of the big plans I had for this year. And I'm never really one of the people who make resolutions, and I'm never one of the people who make vision boards and say, this is going to be my year. I never proclaim this is going to be my year at all. But there's something about this year that I just felt good about going into it. The last week of 2019, I was ready. I was ready to take on 2020. A part of me was very scared of it. I was really scared of 2020. For me, I've recently just turned 18 years old the last 2 weeks of 2019. And for me, 2020 signified that things were ending. A lot of things were ending. My childhood, for one, that was a big thing for me. I was like, oh my God, I'm 18 at the end of the decade. Like, everything is changing. And it did. It felt like everything was changing. And I was really scared. Um, and I pushed through it, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a vision board. I've never been that type of person. And I made a vision board, and I was actually really proud of it. And it's still sitting on the highest point in my room, and I see it from every angle of my room every day. And I used to look up at it and be like, yes, this is it. I am graduating this year with the grades I want. I am going to be in the school musical, and I'm going to get my license. And finally, I've been driving for 2.5 years. Like, come on. I'm going to get a car. I'm going to get a tattoo. And I'm going to go to New York, and I'm going to see a Broadway show. And I've always wanted to do that. Never seen a show, and I was like, I want to go see a Broadway show. I've seen shows at the Blumenthal here in Charlotte, and that's my dream. I wanted to learn how to knit. I want to get a new computer. I wanted to finally buck up and write a script that I was actually proud of. I wanted to become pescatarian and eat right and do kickboxing and dye my hair and take care of my skin and go outside and be closer to nature. And a lot of those things I was able to accomplish within a short amount of time. I still don't have my license, but I'm on the road to graduating. I got into my top school. I was in the school musical. I have a new computer, thank God. You would not be having this podcast without this computer, by the way. I wrote a script that I actually was kind of proud of. I'm pescatarian now, 3 months strong. I literally am starting to learn how to knit and crochet. I'm journaling more, and although the really, really big things that are on my list, like going to New York, Broadway is shut down, unfortunately, but that doesn't mean that dream is shut down. And I think that's what we have to realize right now. is these dreams and these visions that we've created for ourselves for this 12-month period of this year, they're not over. It's really hard to process that. My heart really does go out to all of the people who are stuck in homes with abusive and manipulative people, family members, significant others, kids who are unfortunately in a terrible situation where they have to be home. And maybe financials aren't the best right now. And there's something they can do about that. And it's already hard enough to get school lunch at school. And, now it's like, well, what do we do? And there are amazing school systems who are reaching out and are providing free lunches and stuff. But with all this happening, it really does make you wonder. This is the things that we have been fighting for years. This is the stuff my generation, generations past, have been saying at the polls, at the debates, at the rallies that we need in our government. We need, loan forgiveness, and we need, better school lunches and more access to all these resources. And now that we are literally in a life or death situation, now all these material things seem to be accessible in our country, at least. It is quite strange that, yes, it's great that it's happening, but it should have been happening a long time ago. As a new voter, there are many things that I think about. This is going to be a weird year. 2020, it's a leap year, it's election year, it's an Olympic year. And I didn't even think about the Olympics until last night. I was in bed and I was like, what are we going to do for the Olympics? It's supposed to be in Tokyo this year. What do we do for the Olympics? And I think that's just the biggest question on everyone's mind right now. What are we going to do? I don't know. Who knows? This isolation that we're all in, to a ambivert, bookish kid, this sounded like a dream, hypothetically, a couple months ago. But now this is real. I'm not sure I want this. It's easy to say, like, oh, I'm an introvert, so, like, this is great. I don't care if we're socially isolated. And then you realize social isolation, sometimes it's in the form of all social activities. Sometimes you won't be able to talk to people, even if it's online. You won't be able to see them, and you don't realize how many hugs you give, and how many high fives you give, and how many people you just see on a normal basis once you can't see them anymore. That really hit me hard the first day. Monday rolled around and I was just like, what am I going to do? Like, yes, the average human needs like around 10 or more hugs to survive. And a baby could literally die without like physical touch. And Americans are already touch starved as it is. And it's becoming now more of all starvation, touch, hearing other people's voices, talking to other people. So the fears of our, parents and their parents, like, oh, this generation's not going to be sociable, and this generation's not going to do anything, this generation's not going to create anything. Like, that's all been expelled, I think, with this. I have seen some of the most amazing creations in the last 5 days that I haven't seen in the last 5 years. I do think that we have proved the conspirators wrong, who believe that in the event of an amazing and terrible and incredible, apocalypse, we'll have to retreat to space and live on a space station until we can find an Earth that can sustain us and human life. We'll be watching the same old movies and listening to the same old music because we can't create anything new. I think this crazy, crazy thing that is happening to us, this apocalypse, this crisis that we're all in, has just proven that under pressure, the human race creates. We act, And that's not to say that everything that humans have created is great. And we are responsible and we can be blamed for many of the world's problems. But when it comes down to it, that part of the human condition, that empathy, that leaks out of so many when it's time, it's amazing. And yes, it's a shame. It should have always been there. But we see it in these writers and these authors, these painters, these poets, these songwriters, these performers. On Instagram, the amount of overwhelming love and support and creativity is just pouring out of people who have it and who can do it and who are doing it. You know, it starts as a way to like distract us from the horrors of the world right now, and it started as a way to like give us something to do, give us something to do while we're here alone in our homes quarantined. But someone could write the next amazing musical quarantine for the next month. Somebody can write the next amazing Grammy Award winning song, the next script, could paint the next Van Gogh painting, like anything. And when times get hard, we make good art. That's what we've always done. And even people who are convinced that they don't have a creative bone in their bodies, I think it's ridiculous. I think anyone can do whatever they want to do. Anybody can make art and make good art. And just reading a book and telling people how you feel about a book, I think that's art in itself. I think being able to look at something and appreciate something, that's an art all in itself, as well. And I want to achieve that with this podcast. I really do. It sounds like I'm rambling in this episode, and I kind of am flying at the seat of my pants right now. But yeah, you lose hope in humanity, you gain hope in humanity, back and forth, back and forth. But I've seen some amazing people do some amazing things in the last week. And sometimes it takes being by yourself to realize who you are, to realize what you want. And that's amazing. That is absolutely amazing. And I'm glad that people are able to do that in this terrible time. Of course, I wish nothing but good health and safety to everyone in the world right now. It's tragic, it's devastating, it's terrible. We should not be making light of the situation. It's really easy to say hypothetically, oh, I would do this, but I'm not in this situation, so I'm not going to do this. The people in Italy, people in China, Iran, it's crazy. It's upsetting that your concert gets canceled. It's upsetting that your art show gets canceled. It's upsetting that this is down and this is closed down and this is shut down in schools, this and that and the other. And that should never be invalidated. I think that any high school senior in the world deserves to feel upset that their prom is canceled, that there's uncertainty with their final grades, with the last year of high school and almost the last year of their childhood is canceled, not on their own terms. And nothing in the world should invalidate that. I think that, someone who was really, really saving up to see a Broadway show and now they can't, their emotions are completely valid. And I think that's a lesson that we're learning right now, is not to invalidate others, no matter what is going on in the world. Acknowledge what everyone is going through and say, I may not understand this. I may not understand how you're reacting, your response, or why you feel this emotion right now, but that is beyond me. You feel this, and that is valid. And we can learn that. We can learn that empathy. Yes, it's kind of a part of the human condition to have empathy and to always be able to sympathize with people, but it takes a certain type of person to look at someone and say, I understand. or even I don't understand, but I accept it. Um, I've read at least 4 books in the last 4 or 5 weeks. To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf, Wayward Son by Rainbow Rowell, and The Picture of Dorian Gray, and The Importance of Being Earnest, both by Oscar Wilde. I talked about this in the first episode. It's funny how literature has a way of always coming around right when you need it, just as history does as well. And the way that something in a book can always be applied to something in your life. And I meditated on it, and I thought about, what I've read this last couple of weeks. And the world really is a giant Oscar Wilde book. It is wild. But there are times when people show you who they are. And you have to pay attention. You have to understand it. We know the world around us is pretty flawed. And there's nothing in a book that could tell you that, otherwise, that everything's perfect. That doesn't make sense. There's no book in the world that will tell you that the human race is perfect in every way, unless it's a dystopian novel and someone is lying to you. But I think it's amazing what books can do for people. This is a book talk podcast after all. I did not forget that. I rambled a little bit about the virus and about our lives changing, but I do want to bring it back to a really serious point on what literature can do for the human mind, for the human condition. Just reading a book about a place you never knew about and gaining that information and being like, I never thought that way, or I never knew that they had to deal with this. It's amazing. And yes, it's easier now to gain that information, but there's something more personal about reading about it. Not only that, but the power that books have, the imagination that can be created, the movie in our heads that we get when we read something. It is definitely something that can easily pull anybody out of boredom, out of pain, out of suffering. Some of the most powerful weapons in the world throughout history have literally just been books. They've been knowledge. In almost every crisis, there's been a case where some sort of writing has been burned because it told too much. And I don't want to see anything in this day and age get burned because it said too much, or it got tossed because they didn't need to know that. I think we don't need to expert any literature anymore unless it's like by a really, really bad person. But also being able to see things from different sides, that's important as well. You may not like who wrote that book. You may not believe in what they believe in. But that's their right to speak their mind and to write what they want to write. And whoever wants to read it, it's their right to read whatever they want to read. And if there's any lesson to learn from all of this craziness right now in the world, it's that don't wait. Yes, be safe. Isolate, quarantine, do not be selfish. But if you want to write that book, write that book. If you want to write that script, that movie, if you want to write that play, if you want to read literally Les Mis, that is bigger than the Bible probably, read Les Mis. If you want to paint, if you want to knit, something that you've never been able to do, if you want to try to run a mile around your house, do it and be proud of yourself. This is not guaranteed. None of this is. It sucks that it takes a life and death situation to realize how mortal you truly are, but none of this is guaranteed. But you can guarantee the relationships you create, the things you create. Just do it. Create. Make good art. Make art that's good to you, good for you. Read what you want. Write what you want. So I hope that, this was a little bit of an uplifter. Not the episode I wanted to do this week, but I think I need to do it for me. I am glad I got to have this talk. I have been in social isolation as much as everybody else has been, and talking to myself kind of felt weird, so it almost feels like I'm talking to you. If you want to know what book I'm currently reading right now, I am reading Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque by Edgar Allan Poe. This has been sitting on my shelf for a couple of months now, I think since like November, and I have been really wanting to read more of his works. And yeah, I recently watched a BuzzFeed Unsolved video about Edgar Allan Poe and his untimely demise. And I realized that I had nothing to read at that time. And I looked over at my bookshelf, and there it was. And it's pretty good right now. All of his short stories, well, not all of them, but this is really the book that put him on the map. A lot of short stories, a lot of poems. It's a really, really, really good book. So yeah, I will link this down below. And stay positive, stay safe, stay healthy. I will be making an Instagram for the podcast very soon where you can post suggestions, comment some book recommendations. I'll be setting up polls, different things like that. If you are interested in being interviewed, or if there's an episode you would like to do with me and you live in the Charlotte area and you know me and you like what I do, please don't hesitate to DM me with any ideas. Please don't forget to subscribe. You can also listen to the podcast on Spotify and Anchor, and we'll be coming to almost all podcast platforms very soon. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, have a good day. Bye.